I never would have thought that the most ordinary day of my life would turn into the day I tore apart my 10-year marriage, all because of 2 talking parrots. If you're watching this video, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Because the story of how 2 simple pet birds exposed my husband's cynical plan is proof that sometimes the truth surfaces from the most unexpected voices. I want to tell you exactly what Charlie and Lola, my beloved parrots, repeated to me, and why I immediately understood that those words were the key to my freedom. Let me take you back to how it all started. For 10 years, I believed I was living an American fairy tale. My name is Samantha. I worked as a public relations manager for one of the most innovative tech companies here in Seattle. Think Amazon, but smaller and more exclusive. At 38, I had everything. A career that my colleagues envied, a beautiful loft in the Capitol Hill neighborhood with a view of Puget Sound, and what I thought was a dream marriage. My husband, Marcus Thompson, was one of those men who, when they entered a room, all conversations stopped. 6'5", perfectly styled salt and pepper hair, always dressed like he just stepped out of the pages of GQ. He was a luxury real estate consultant, specializing in million-dollar properties, waterfront villas, downtown Seattle penthouses, ranches in the Cascade Mountains. Our love story had begun like a romantic movie. We met at a charity party at the Four Seasons. I was managing the event for my company. He was there as a potential buyer of a property we were auctioning for charity. He had approached me with that magnetic confidence of his and said, "I bet you're the brain behind all this perfection." 2 years of fairy tale courtship, then a dream wedding in Napa Valley. 350 guests, a $600,000 budget, and a honeymoon in the Maldives that made all my friends on Instagram envious. But there was one detail that made our life together unique: the parrots, Charlie and Lola. I had adopted them 3 years before meeting Marcus, when I still lived in my first apartment in Fremont. Charlie was a male African gray parrot, with that elegant gray and red tail that looked like a small fire. Lola was his companion, slightly smaller but incredibly more talkative. These birds weren't simple pets. African gray parrots have the intelligence of a 5-year-old child and the memory of an elephant. Charlie had learned to perfectly imitate the sound of my alarm clock, so much so that I often woke up thinking it was the phone ringing. Lola, on the other hand, had developed a passion for imitating my work phone conversations. Often, when I was on the phone with important clients, I'd hear her repeat phrases like "absolutely fantastic" or "let's proceed with implementation" with my exact intonation. Marcus, when we got engaged, had found the parrots interesting but noisy. He didn't hate them, but it was clear they weren't his type of company. "They're too intelligent," he often said. "They make me feel like they're judging me." Now I understand that phrase was more prophetic than I thought. When we moved in together to the Capitol Hill loft, I insisted that Charlie and Lola have their large aviary in the main living room, with a view of the city. Marcus had agreed, but established a rule. In the evening, when I come home from work, I'd like some quiet. Can you cover the cage? It was a reasonable request, I thought. Marcus worked hard, traveled often, deserved peace when he came home. The first signs that something was changing began about 8 months ago. Marcus had always traveled for work. It was the nature of his business. The luxury real estate market on the West Coast required physical presence, face-to-face meetings with clients who spent 8-figure sums on a property. But the frequency of trips had increased dramatically. Before, he left maybe twice a month. Now he was away almost every week. "The market is exploding," he explained while packing his suitcase with that military precision of his. "I have clients in Portland who want to invest $30 million in commercial properties. Others in Vancouver who are looking for seaside villas. And then there's this group of investors from San Francisco who want to create a portfolio of luxury properties throughout the Pacific Northwest." His explanations were always detailed, always credible. Marcus had the gift of making any real estate topic interesting. He told me about penthouses with rooftop pools, villas with private helipads, Investments that would change the urban landscape of entire cities. And I believed him. Why should I have doubted? Our bank account was flourishing. Marcus always returned with expensive gifts. A Hermes bag from a trip to Portland. A Cartier bracelet from Vancouver. A $2,000 bottle of wine from Napa Valley, where he had closed an incredible deal. But Charlie and Lola had started behaving strangely during his absences. Normally, when Marcus was away, the Parrots were more relaxed. They could chat freely without his presence. That put them slightly on edge. But now, when Marcus left, they became agitated. Charlie started walking nervously on his perch. Lola made sounds I had never heard before. And then there were the whispers. At first, I thought they were just the usual sounds they imitated from television or my work calls. But these whispers were different. They were intimate, almost secretive. I heard them say fragments like, "Yes, love," with a voice that sounded like Marcus's, but softer, more tender than he normally spoke with me. Or, "Soon, soon," with an urgency I didn't understand. Once, while I was working from my home office, I heard Lola repeat, "Beautiful, you're beautiful," with a male voice I recognized as Marcus's, but with an inflection he hadn't used with me in recent years. I started taking mental notes. When exactly did the Parrots say these phrases? Always when Marcus was traveling. Never when he was home. And the strangest thing, when Marcus returned from his trips and heard the Parrots repeat these fragments, he became visibly nervous. "These birds are getting too noisy," he started saying. "Maybe we should think about moving them to another room." But I resisted. Charlie and Lola had been with me before Marcus, and they would stay with me. They were my family. What I didn't know was that they were becoming my personal detectives. The moment that changed everything came on a Thursday afternoon in November. It was raining, that typical Seattle rain that seems never to end, and I was working from my home office on a campaign for launching a new tech product. Marcus had left Tuesday morning for what he had described as the most important trip of my career. A group of international investors in Portland who wanted to buy an entire city block to build a luxury complex. I had headphones on, focused on a PowerPoint presentation, when I heard a sound that froze my blood. Charlie, with Marcus's unmistakable voice, that deep, confident voice I knew so well, said clearly, "Come, love, my wife isn't here." I took off my headphones so fast they fell to the floor. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the sound of rain against the windows. Then, as if programmed, Lola added with a female voice that definitely wasn't mine, "How I've missed you, darling." And then, as if that wasn't enough, Charlie repeated again, "Come, love, my wife isn't here." The phrase was perfect, complete, not a random fragment or a coincidence. It was a complete sentence, pronounced with the exact intonation Marcus used when he was excited or affectionate. But I was the wife who wasn't there, and the woman who had said, "How I've missed you," certainly wasn't me. I felt the world collapse under my feet. My hands were shaking. My heart was beating so hard I thought the Parrots could hear it. I sat on the couch, staring at Charlie and Lola, who were looking at me with those intelligent eyes, as if they knew exactly what they had just revealed. African gray parrots learn through repetition. They don't invent phrases out of thin air. If Charlie was repeating, "Come, love, my wife isn't here," with Marcus's voice, it meant Marcus had said that phrase enough times for it to be memorized. And if Lola was responding with, "How I've missed you, darling," with an unknown female voice, it meant there was another woman, in my loft, in my sacred space. The first reaction was pure anger. I wanted to call Marcus immediately, scream, demand explanations. But then, my professional experience in public relations took over. In PR, the first rule is, never react impulsively. Gather information, verify facts, then act strategically. I decided to do exactly that. I took my phone and started recording the Parrots. I wanted to have audio evidence of what they were saying. For the next 3 days, every time Charlie and Lola repeated conversation fragments, I was there with my phone ready. I collected an entire archive of feathered evidence. Marcus saying, "You're so beautiful when you do that." A female voice responding, "Only for you." "Baby," Marcus whispering, "the next trip will be longer, I promise." And the same female voice saying, "I can't wait." But I needed more than parrot recordings. I needed concrete evidence. The opportunity came the following Saturday. Marcus had returned from his Portland trip Friday evening, tired and distant as always after business trips. Saturday morning, while he was showering, I noticed he had left his secondary laptop on the kitchen table, the one he rarely used, mainly for backups and less important work. Marcus had always been protective of his electronic devices. Confidential client information? He always said, "I can't risk privacy violations." But that morning, perhaps due to fatigue or overconfidence, he had left the laptop open and unlocked. My conscience struggled for about 10 seconds. Then, Charlie's voice repeating, "My wife isn't here," won over every moral scruple. What I found on that laptop exceeded every worst imagination I had. The Portland Clients folder didn't contain real estate information. It contained hundreds of photos of a blonde woman, probably in her 30s, in increasingly intimate poses. Some photos were clearly taken in my loft. I recognized the living room couch, the view from the bedroom window, even the kitchen where I prepared breakfast every morning. The name of the next folder made me nauseous. My real life. Inside, I found detailed planning that had been going on for almost a year. Marcus wasn't just cheating on me. He was planning to leave the marriage, but not before implementing an elaborate plan to maximize his gains from the separation. I found emails with his divorce attorney, an attorney he had hired 8 months earlier, long before I suspected anything, where they discussed strategies to minimize financial losses and maximize rights to common assets. But the most shocking part was his strategy to steal my career. Marcus had created a detailed document titled Operation Fresh Start, where he listed all my most important professional contacts, the CEOs of tech companies I worked with, the influencers I managed, even the journalists with whom I had built relationships over the years. The plan was diabolical in its simplicity. Marcus would use his charm and his position as husband of Seattle's PR queen to convince my clients to follow him in his new entrepreneurial adventure. Not real estate, but a new communication and marketing agency he would launch together with his mistress. The blonde woman in the photos was named Isabella Rivera, and she wasn't a simple affair. She was a marketing strategist with an MBA from Stanford, who had worked for some of the biggest agencies in San Francisco before moving to Seattle for love, as she had written in one of the emails to Marcus. Together, they had planned to steal not only my husband, but the entire career I had built in 15 years of work. Digging deeper into the emails between Marcus and Isabella, I discovered that she was the strategic brain behind the entire operation. She wasn't a simple mistress who had ruined my marriage out of passion. She was a calculating predator who had identified Marcus and me as her ticket to professional success in Seattle. In an email dated 6 months earlier, Isabella had written to Marcus, "Samantha has built an incredible network in this city. She has direct access to CEOs of Amazon, Microsoft, and at least a dozen startups that are about to become unicorns. If we can transfer even just 40% of her contacts to our agency, we can bill at least $2 million in the first year." Marcus had responded, "The plan is working perfectly. Samantha doesn't suspect anything. She thinks my trips are for real estate. Every time I come home, I tell her elaborate stories about my clients to justify the expensive gifts I buy you.